Hey guys, what's going on? Hope everybody's having a good day today, and thanks for tuning in for this afternoon's video, man. Just I'm heading back home right now from Tablerock Lake. Had a fish the moment on the water lesson down there today, and wanted to take a chance to give you guys a sort of an area local lakes fishing report here from all around the area. Tablerock, Grand Lake, Lake of the Ozarks, Stockton, Shoals, and got a pretty good feel for what's going on and everything, so I thought I'd share it with you guys, sort of go over each lake, break it down a little bit, and sort of give you some tips and pointers that might help you guys catch some the next time you head out there, if you're going to go out anytime soon, or if you don't fish around here locally, maybe some of the stuff I tell you can help you on your own local lake. So anyway, let's start out Tablerock Lake. Been fishing down here, quite a bit here the last few days since I got back from the Toyota series on Grand Lake last week, and I'll break that down. Tablerock this past weekend, it just got it got a hammering of epic proportions. They had that KVD Big Bass tournament, which I can't believe they had that thing right on top of the spawn. That, to me, that's very irresponsible for whoever put that tournament on, to put a tournament of that size right on top of the spawn on Tablerock. Didn't really think that's cool. Also, Aaron Martins did a interview on Stray Cast last week talking about that, and Aaron was talking about he thinks that there shouldn't be any tournaments allowed during the spawn, which I agree with him completely on that. We just need to let these fish spawn. But anyway, big bass in that tournament. This was, I can't remember how many hundreds or thousands of boats this tournament had in it, but big bass for the tournament after 2 days was only a 5.5 pounder, and I think like a 6 pounder, just a bit over 6 pound, won the entire event. And that just goes to show you how Tablerock has declined as far as a big fish lake. I mean, back 30 years ago, it would have taken 9 pound plus pounder to win that tournament for sure, and 6 pounders were pretty common. And so you can see now anymore, like on Tablerock, a 5 or 6 pounder is a giant bass. But anyway, the fishing overall, when we start talking about this, and we'll start Tablerock first, the fishing's good on all the lakes, and the reason it's good is because we are right in the middle of the weeks in Missouri and Arkansas, this part of the country, when most of the bass are shallow up on the lake. So the fishing is going to be good because there's simply more bass up in that zone where people are fishing at. And fish are getting real close to spawning. Some fish are already making beds at Tablerock. You can go back into the coves right now and you can see beds, and you can see some small fish on the beds, but you don't see the good fish cruising back in the back of those things like normally happens this time of year. So we're just a little bit early, so you can pretty much, I'm guessing that there's going to be a major spawn occurring, from now for over the next week or two down there. A lot of fish are going to be moving up shallow. But at Tablerock right now, they're all over the place. Literally, you can catch fish at Tablerock in 2 foot of water, and you can catch fish in 30 foot of water. I've been fishing down there the last 2-3 days, and literally we caught a bunch of fish in all different depth zones. They're just using a lot of different depth zones. And on Tablerock, with the clear water and the mixed species on it, you have fish that are in all 3 stages of the spawn, for a long period down here. So you can catch Kentucky's and smallmouth out in 25 or 30 foot of water. You can get up shallow and catch largemouth right now in less than 5 foot of water. Fishing's just really good on the lake. It's, I've been fishing Tablerock as much as anybody this year, and the fishing is as good as I've seen it all year long on the lake right now. So, the upside is the fishing's really great right now. The downside is the lake's getting hammered, unbelievable. But if I were you guys and you were going to Tablerock right now, just to try to catch a lot of fish, just get on those steeper 45-degree angle banks, put your boat in about 20-25 foot of water, and just fish any type of slow bottom bouncing lure like a jig, Ned rig, shaky head, drop shot, anything like that in that 10 to 30 foot zone, and you'll get a lot of bites doing that, and some good ones too. We probably, today out there we culled several, close to 15-pound limits out there, so fish are biting really good down there. Grand Lake, let's move to Grand a little bit. I fished all last week at Grand Lake during the Toyota Series tournament, and fishing is tough at Grand Lake right now. You know, it took just a little over 50 pounds to win the tournament. I wound up finishing 37th in that tournament, and I had 27 pounds. But even though that sounds like some pretty decent weight, it's not as good as what Grand used to be. I mean, it used to be you wouldn't even think about winning an April tournament down there with less than 60 pounds for 3 days. And it would take a lot more weight than what I had for 27 pounds for 2 days to get a 37th place check. And you've got to work for them at Grand, like at Grand right now. Grand is just like every other lake around here, especially with COVID over the past year. Lake gets hammered, it's getting hammered by tournaments, and at Grand right now, a lot of people are running the same water. The main fishing report right now with Grand is that you got a couple different things working on there. You got fish in a lot of different stages of the spawn. But since you have the water's pretty dirty at Grand right now, it's dirty from one end to the other. It's not, you don't have your typical clean water on the lower end like you normally do. It's dirty even down by the dam. The bass have a lot fewer options. A lot of the bigger fish last week in that tournament came like fishing crankbaits and slow rolling spinnerbaits and stuff on the steep rocky banks. Not necessarily the ones with the docks on them, which is rare, but just on the steep banks. A lot of the big bags came like that, and that's something that you can still catch fish on doing right now, especially if you have wind or any type of windy days. But other than that, and how I caught my fish and how the fish are setting up down there right now, it's a dock deal completely. In my opinion, I think that the majority of the good fish in Grand Lake, they spawn behind the docks, and that's where you got to fish. You got to get in behind those docks and fight those cables, and it's not an easy way to fish, because if you got a days like we had in the Toyota Series where the wind's blowing, you got to be so careful not to jack your boat up. You can scratch your cowling, you can scratch your boat on the cables and all the steel around there. But if you're going to catch good fish right now at Grand Lake, that's what you got to be doing. Those bass at Grand Lake right now are really keying in around the walkways of the docks, and that requires you to skip and pitch and flip back in there a lot, mainly skipping. I think right now probably the number one tactic if you want to go down and catch them at Grand Lake right now is to take a 3/8 ounce jig. It doesn't really matter the size. It can be a finesse jig or a full-size jig, and simply skip it under walkways, skip it on the shallow parts of docks. That's where those fish are setting up to spawn. That's where those good fish are at, and that's where those fish that you're going to catch that are more consistent, because a lot of those open water, open bank fish are going to get pounded. They're going to move from those pre-spawn locations back in behind those docks. So fish are there to be caught at Grand right now, but it's not easy. From what I saw, you have to work for every single bite that you get at Grand. You can't slop through an area. You're not going to have many areas to yourself there unless you're fishing during the week. But get in behind those docks and put a jig in your hand, and you'll get some bites. In the tournament, that's how I wind up catching mine. I caught them on a chatterbait around the docks the first day, and then wound up catching them on it. And I caught a few on a lipless crankbait, and I wound up catching them, pitching a jig around those docks the second day, and had 12, 13 keepers or so, and had a 15-pound bag. So overall, I would going back to rating them, I would rate Table Rock at a 7 right now, and I'd rate Grand at a 5. I don't think it's outstanding. I think the fish are biting a little bit there, but it's not anything great. Stockton Lake, the fish have been biting really good right up there right now. There's a lot of fish to be caught on Stockton. You can go up there and get a lot of bites, doing a lot of different stuff. You can pitch and flip shallow right now, and you can catch them, but those better fish aren't in that zone right now. Those better fish are still out a little bit. So my suggestion, if you guys want to go to Stockton right now and catch them, is basically pull your Carolina rig out. Pull out a Carolina rig or a crankbait, stay on the outside edge of the bushes, fish those secondary points, key in that 6 to 12 foot zone, and those fish at Stockton are a little bit behind now. The lake's a little bit farther north. They're not quite as far along as Table Rock or Stockton, and they're just now starting to want to get bedding. But that's going to be my number one thing there. Like I said, you can catch them pitching and flipping shallow right now, but you just are not going to catch the grade of fish that you will if you move out just a little bit too. There's also, you know, a pretty decent buzzbait bite going on in Stockton right now. You can run to the back of the cuts and the back of the coves and key in on that sort of that 2 to 4 foot zone with like a black half-ounce buzzbait. That's a good way to catch them also. Now, let's go to Lake the Ozarks and Bull Shoals too. Lake the Ozarks starting to get pretty good right now. It's fishing pretty similar to Grand in the fact that the fish are really starting to get dock oriented. You know, up until the last few weeks, there were still a lot of A-rig fish being caught, jerkbait fish. There were still a lot of fish relating to some of those deeper secondary points and brush piles. But now those fish are really starting to get keyed in on those inside parts of the docks, especially those docks that have seawalls on it. And the biggest piece of advice that I would give you guys if you're going up at Lake the Ozarks right now is start running the back 2/3 of the coves and start keying in on those boat docks that have, you know, some pretty significant seawall and riprap around it. And same deal as like Grand. Take either your full size 3/8 ounce jig or some type of a, you know, 1/4 ounce finesse jig, possibly a wacky rig too, you know, especially on the lower end if it's a little bit clearer, and fish around and in front of those seawalls around the walkways on the docks. That's where those fish are at right now. That's where they're going to stay in those type of areas over the next few weeks. And there's plenty of docks at Lake the Ozarks for you guys to fish if you get on that pattern out there. But don't overlook the wacky rig at Lake the Ozarks right now. If you get into part of the lake that has water visibility of over like 2.5 feet, which is pretty common, sort of like from the Shawnee Bend area down to the dam, that wacky rig behind the docks is a big way to catch them right now. So give that a try if you guys are down there. And finally, let's talk a little bit about Bull Shoals. Bull Shoals is one of my favorite April lakes that you could possibly fish, and they're biting really good at Bull Shoals right now. Bull Shoals fish is a little bit different than Table Rock. It's got some similarities, but the fish is a little bit different. It's laid out a little bit different. And the thing that I've noticed about Bull Shoals lately is those fish are more concentrated more in the back 2/3 of those flatter coves. So what I would suggest is just pull out your map, look at those flatter coves that run off of the secondary, those flatter coves that are in those major creeks off the lake. Say for example, you know, Big Creek on the lake. You know, you can go into those creeks like Big Creek, go about 2/3 of the way back into the coves off the major creek arms, and just put a shaky head in your hand, a Ned rig. You can catch them on a swim bait down there right now. Some type of like a swim bait, like a mag draft, is going to work really good. And also you can catch them good once you get back in those coves, just fan casting those banks with like a 3/8 ounce green pumpkin jig with like a big salty chunk on it. That's a key player at Bull Shoals in April down there, is a big full-size jig, especially if you get back into those coves those flatter coves and they've got any type of like a short bluff in the back of them, which a lot of them do. You know, fishing that jig on those short bluffs will work really good. Another thing that's working really good at Bull Shoals right now is a floating worm. You can take like a bubble gum or, you know, like a yellow floating worm, go to the back of those pockets, pull in there about 50 yards from the back and start fan casting that floating worm all over the back end. And you're going to be able to catch a lot of those bass that are up in there cruising right now, getting ready to start bedding. So same deal with Bull Shoals. There's a lot of fish that are starting to move up on the beds. There's going to be more coming over the next couple weeks, and it's going to be good. So that's sort of an overview, guys, of the area lakes there. You know, fishing is good right now. You know, even though, you know, you hear me complaining about the fishing pressure a lot, and I'll continue to do that because it's a big factor in our fishing. There's probably not a better time to go fishing than there is right now. The mid part of April, when you're fishing in almost any lake in the country, especially in Missouri and Arkansas, it's simply the best time of year to fish. There's more good fish in less than 10 foot of water than there ever is any other time of the year. So guys, get out there, man. If you guys want to go out and catch fish, take advantage of it right now, man. Get out there, and it's just a great time to be on the water. So anyway, hope that helps you guys catch a few more fish. Get out there. Again, thanks for tuning in the video, much appreciated. Please hit that like button if you like this video, and please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Much appreciated with that. So we'll be back soon with another one. Take her easy.